Good day. I am astrologer Lateesha Hinton with Soul's Bread Wisdom. Today I will be presenting an astrological study of the late and the great Whitney Houston. It was Whitney who introduced me to my own musical voice at the age of 10. As I share my findings in this study, it is with the intent to shine a light on the connection that we have with the cosmos and that which it has with us. I endeavor to show how the birth chart maps out the promise of a life and explore the ideas of fate and free will. Today, I will walk through the birth chart using ancient astrology techniques, which were used by Egyptians and later adopted by the Greeks and medieval astrologers, and then ultimately, many of them walked their way up to modern astrology, but many of these tools and techniques have been lost. As I was originally trained in modern astrology, and I am thankful for what it has brought to my understanding, I am more thankful for the depth of understanding that ancient astrology has afforded me to date. The ideas that we will be discussing today and through this study will be: one, establishing whether the chart is a day or night chart; two, the condition of the planets by sect and by house; three, what childhood looked like for Miss Whitney Houston; four, the synastry within her birth chart of her mother and father and the roles that they played in her life, and we're able to see that through the planetary alignments; five, the timing of success through the tool of Annual Profections; six, the timing of marriage and childbirth through the transits; seven, challenges introduced into the life via transiting planets; and eight, challenging times seen through zodiacal release. And those are just some of the things that we will be discussing. There may be more that are introduced, but as I begin, I want to serenade the spirit of Miss Whitney Houston with one of the songs that touched me very deeply within my soul. Just a little bit. And I will always love you. I will always love you. And I will always love you, Whitney. I will always love you. Whitney, I love you. I will always love you. Okay, so we're going to start by determining whether this is a day or a night chart. And so the way that we determine that is by finding the sun. And we want to see if the sun is located below the horizon or above the horizon. And that is going to give us the information that we need as far as determining which planets will be more helpful for Whitney during her life and which planets will be more challenging. So Whitney was born at 8:55 p.m. August 9th, 1963 in Newark, New Jersey. So she has a night chart, and we know this because the sun is beneath the horizon line. So this line here is the line that would indicate where the sun is rising. So the sun will rise here and set here. And then so it is beneath the horizon. So it's in this lower section of the chart. So it is a night chart. And so for a night chart, the most beneficial planet is the planet Venus. So we have Venus here in the sign of Leo. And the most challenging planet in a night chart will be Saturn. So Saturn does better if with a day chart, and in the sect, it's called the sect. So this sect planet is very challenged at night, and it is here making an opposition to the Sun and Venus. So we know that Venus will be her most helpful planet, and Saturn will be the most challenging planet throughout her life. So what does that mean? That means that when there is a transit that comes through and it activates Saturn, then it will activate this 12th house. It will activate this 6th house, most certainly. And so this is the axis. The 6th and the 12th house is the axis of health. The 12th house is associated with mental health. And then the 6th house in ancient astrology is associated with physical health. So Saturn here is in what is called, the ancients called this house the joy of Saturn. So Saturn likes to be in the 12th house because it is associated with the things or the characteristics that are more Saturnized, and that is isolation, that is coldness. It's in the sign of Aquarius, so it is in its own dignity in the sign of Aquarius. But being here in the 12th house, it is it brings additional loneliness. It brings additional challenges when the transits come through as it relates to what loneliness brings you, what challenges that come through as it relates to the things that are hidden, as it relates to spirituality. So Saturn here is a key player that we will see again and again over time as we look at this chart. Okay, so Whitney's first house is in the sign of Pisces. So she's a Pisces rising. Okay, so the ruler of Pisces is Jupiter, and Jupiter is found here retrograde in the second house. So the first house has to do with the body. It has to do with the physical body. The 12th house is an indication of what the native, or what Whitney's mom was going through, and what Whitney was going through as she was in the womb of her mother just before she was born. This is the place of the 12th house. The 12th house is a liminal place, a place that stands in between worlds. And so it is this place of darkness that does not operate like any other of the houses within the birth chart. Again, it is a place between worlds, between the spirit realm and the natural world. So this is that place right before you are born, and then Pisces is rising above just as she is born, and then Chiron is there. So Chiron sitting in the first house in the sign of Pisces shows automatically that Whitney was a person that was very sensitive to energy, very sensitive to even if Chiron had not been here. This is a person who within their body, they soak up very deeply all of the energies that are around them. So if there are people who are going through depression or negativity or sadness or any such thing, Pisces rising affecting the body shows that she was a person who was easily influenced by other people's energy. And so when we have Pisces in significant places, the rising, the sun, the moon in particular, and other personal planets too in the sign of Pisces, it gives a person an extreme amount of sensitivity. So they feel so much pain from others that oftentimes it is easier for them to escape. And so we know that Whitney had a history of drug and alcohol abuse, and surely she was using this to escape the pain and the sensitivity that she was feeling. And so, in addition to that, she has Chiron here, retrograde at 13 degrees in the sign of Pisces. So, this wounded healer, Chiron, and we understand that Chiron was rejected by his mother at birth, and she said, "Get this monster away from me," ultimately. And so Whitney, being born with this Chiron in the first house in the sign of Pisces, yielded itself to her not feeling accepted in her own body, not feeling that she was good enough, not feeling that she was beautiful enough, not feeling that her body uh, was her own, or her body was something that was really appreciated. And so, in that, there is a lot of sensitivity, oversensitivity, where Chiron is, oversensitivity to what other people have to say, or there is a perception, because oftentimes where Chiron is, there is a perception about displacement, that we are being rejected in. And oftentimes it's not even what other people are feeling about us, or they may not even be thinking that way, but because we received a wound early on inside of our mother's womb up until the age of 8, this is an area that stands out so huge, and it can be our place of demise, especially in an angular house, especially in the first house. And again, Saturn being here is an indication that as she was in the womb, as she was coming in from the spirit realm into the earth plane, there were challenges that were here. There was some anguish. There was some perhaps some mental challenges that her mother was going through, some stress, some pain that she was going through, over and beyond natural labor pains. But there was something that was happening where perhaps her mother was feeling isolated. Perhaps she was not feeling the warmth and the coldness. Perhaps she was feeling, because it is here in the sign of Aquarius, perhaps her mother was feeling that she was not receiving the understanding and the compassion from perhaps her husband as she was going through this time of birth with Whitney. Okay, so we see again the Pisces rising, and then when we come over here on the opposite, we have the descendant here. So this is really key. So this is the setting place. So this is where we sit. So we begin here. So Whitney begins here as a person. We begin in the first house, and then we reach our height, our peak here in the 10th house, and then the 7th house is the setting of us, and it is where our partnerships begin. And so here we can see that the people who partnered with Whitney have these particular characteristics. So we have Pluto that is here in the sign of Virgo. We have Mercury, which is ascended, which is exalted in the sign of Virgo. And we have Uranus here. So Mercury, who is exalted in his own house in the 7th house, is in an enclosure between these two huge outer planets. So the Mercury represents Whitney's voice. It represents her ability to think and to rationalize and to use her voice in the way that she felt was the best way, and to articulate it at its best. And of course, Mercury represents how we process thoughts, how we analyze things. And in the sign of Virgo, it is exalted because it can get down to the very details of a situation. And so we know that Whitney's voice, her way of communicating with her voice, was extremely beautiful, extremely, exceptionally beautiful. And these two powerhouses sitting here, Pluto and Uranus, definitely have a lot to do with that. But it also shows, so Uranus is bringing in this shock and bringing in this um, something new, something over the top, something that is rebellious, something that is extraordinary, because Uranus is one that breaks the norms. And with her voice, we know that she did do that. Pluto gives a depth, gives an ability to transform, and to here with the Mercury gives an ability to go to a deep place, a deep understanding. And oftentimes with her music, we could see that she was able to go to the very depths, and to the very deep, and pull up emotions that were able to move us all. And we see that here with this exalted Mercury. And so this also indicates the people who partnered with her, the people who helped her, because it's in the seventh house of partnership. So it gives an indication to what marriage is going to look like, to what business partnerships are going to look like, and to any of those who come into our lives. So with Whitney in particular, when we look at the synastry of her parents, her father had a Virgo sun, Virgo moon, and Mercury in Virgo. So when we look to synastry, we know that Whitney's father played a huge part as it relates to her career. And he had a publishing company. And so with that, he was able to work deals and help promote her voice. And but we can see that because his sun and moon and Mercury came here, and it was in a conjunction with Pluto and Mercury, that there were power issues. Because where we see Pluto, we know that there are dynamics of power and control. And so, of course, we would later hear about that before her father died, there were years where she and her father did not speak because of power and control. And he came out publicly in 2002 and said that she owed him and his company $100,000, and went on an interview and said, give us the money, give me the money you owe me. I helped you with the court deal, and I helped market you and help arrange a new record deal for you. And they had a broken relationship, and it came from this power and control. And we're talking about synastry. We're talking about planets coming into another person's house. So when we have whoever it is that is in our life, their planets, their personal planets, and they will move into particular houses, and they will affect the relationship. So her Pluto being here, and his sun and moon and Mercury coming into this house, brought a lot of challenge to their relationship. Power, again, power dynamics, power and control issues. And we can also see that here in the sixth house, because the sun, oftentimes, it does not always represent the father, but oftentimes it does represent the father. So she has a son that is in good dignity because it is in his own sign. Leo rules the sign, the sun rules the sign of Leo. So Leo is at home here in the sixth house. But Leo, the sun is in a challenging place because the sixth house is known to be one of the most challenging houses. It is in the ancient text. It is called the joy of Mars. So this is a house that lends itself to many challenges. The sixth house is associated with servitude. It is a house of illness. It is a house of one of martyrdom. In the ancient times, it was a house associated with slavery. Um, and again, a house where you are subordinate. You come to be subordinate to um, others oftentimes. So Venus, Venus is here and it is combust by the sun. So in order for Venus to do its very best, though it is the benefic of this chart, it blesses this chart. It's not able to do its greatest work because it is burned under the rays of the sun. So a planet needs to be at least 18 degrees away from the sun in order not to be burned by the sun and in order to give off its very best energy, its very best strength. So with the sun being here, it does bring some help, but not the greatest help. So, and again, it is standing across from the greater malefic, which is Saturn. So here we can see that opposite her sun, there are continuous power dynamics. There are continuous blocks in her life as far as being able to shine the way that she wants to shine. So ultimately, her sun and her Venus come to serve others, come to serve in a place of martyrdom. And I listened before recording this, I watched many hours of documentaries and read much and listened to many interviews from Whitney. And early on, she was saying that, she realized that she had an amazing gift, but she realized, she said, I believe that I can have the gift as long as I am giving it away to the world and giving it away to others. So that is that dynamic. That is that Piscean energy. And then that sixth house energy of great servitude. So oftentimes, we can see from this chart that the dynamic between her and her father was that her gift of her communication, and I say that because the ruler of the third house, which is about communication, it's about siblings, is here conjunct the sun in the sixth house. So the ruler of the third is serving the sun um, in the sixth house. So even though she has this amazing gift of communication in the sign of Taurus, which rules the throat, it comes over here and it operates as a servant. It operates as a servant. And indeed, it does serve the world. It does serve the world. It did serve the world and it still does serve the world. But it was under the control of her parents, father and mother. The son can represent, the son again can represent uh, those who have authority over you, those who have authority over you. And so we can see that throughout her career, when we listen to the interviews and we um, listen to the documentaries, even though she had this amazing gift and this amazing talent, she was not ever really able to use it the way that she wanted to. And so she would, often talk about that. She would often talk about that situation. So again, the ruler of the third house is serving the purposes of the sixth house here. Okay, and then she has in the second house of income and stability and the things that we possess. The second house represents how it is that, when we come into the world, we come in as a baby here in the first house, and someone else has to take care of our body. Somebody else has to swaddle us and has to care for us. And then in the second house, we begin to toddle along. We begin to start getting our steps, and we begin to understand a bit of what makes us feel stable, what um, makes us feel safe and secure. In the second house, it is where we start identifying with, I don't want to be separated from my mother. That's that 2-year-old toddler where, if you separate them from their mother, they'll scream, because there is this idea of understanding safety, and safety is with my mother. Safety is with my the things that I know, the home that I come to, the routine that I have, and my steps that I begin to take on my own. The stability of me being able to walk out these steps is found in the second house. And so here in this second house, her mother, the moon, which often the moon oftentimes represents the mother, but not every time. But in her case, it is quite clear as we walk through her life that her mother played a huge part in her success. And so the mother for her could be represented by the sun and or the moon in this particular chart. When you listen to the interviews of her mother early on, I could hear her mother, Ase Houston, saying, I did not let her. I chose for her to sign with this company with Clive Davis, and I allowed her, and I chose this company, and and when Whitney said that she wanted to sing professionally, I taught her how to speak. I taught her how to act and how to behave and how to sing the songs. Of course, her mother was a professional singer as well. So she has Jupiter here. So Jupiter, of course, in the second house, it increases this ability for income. And so it is the ruler of the first house coming here into the second house. So the first house has to do with the body, has to do with the self. The ruler comes here into the second house. So it is through her body that she will earn income. The moon also in ancient times represents the body. It represents that thing that is always rising and moving and falling. As we know, the moon, it waxes and it wanes and it changes. It changes. It is the um, fasting moving planet in the sky. It moves even faster than Mercury because the moon is going to change signs every 2.5 days. And not only is it going to change signs every 2.5 days, it's going to change its phases. So if you go and you look at the moon today and then you look at the moon tomorrow, it's going to appear different. It represents the moods and the changes. And when Whitney was born, she was born under a waning moon. So again, the moon represents the body. And in some ancient texts, with the Egyptians, they associated the moon with Thoth, who was the deity that ruled communication and travel. And quick travel in ancient astrology is associated with the moon. So Whitney's ability to have this powerful communication is not only associated with Taurus here in the third house, but if we look to the ancients, it is also associated with this communication energy that is given by by Thoth, by the Lord Thoth, and it is associated with the moon. So here in the second house, we can understand that her income, that the way that she would earn income would be through her body, the ruler of the first and the second, Jupiter, and through the moon, its ability to be able to change and be able to be variable and to be able to communicate and travel. And with her voice, she was able to do that. She was able to go to the highest heights and the lowest lows. It is in the sign of Aries. So the moon doesn't necessarily like to be in the sign of Aries because it is sitting in the house of Mars, because Mars is the ruler of Aries. So Mars has to be the host to the moon in this sign. Mars has to give the moon what it needs. So the moon has come over for a visit to the house of Mars in the sign of Aries. So what does Mars have? Mars has knives because Mars is cutting. Mars um, is about having confrontation, is about warring to win the battle. So you have the moon, who is traditionally, her energy is about a swaddling and nurturing and an attachment to emotion. And so now it is sitting here at the house of Mars, and Mars is hosting the moon. And so the Mars gives the moon her way of operating. So she wants to emote, she wants to share how she really feels, and she wants to nurture and so forth. But Mars is about competition and winning. So that is what Mars gives to the moon as the moon is in his house. So this moon of Whitney's operates in a very competitive nature. It is about winning. It is about being the best. It is about doing what it takes to meet the emotional needs. And so the emotional needs that come through as the moon is sitting in the house of Aries is going to be one that can be combative. It can be impulsive with the sign of Aries. You know, the emotions can be easily triggered to anger. And oftentimes the moon will indicate how the native sees their mother, how they felt that they were treated by their mother. So we can take from this that Whitney's expression that she had, or her feeling, or her perception, better word, her perception that she had of her mother was one of, uh, a combative, competitive nature. And I watched an interview early on with Whitney and her mom was saying, she's a Leo, so I have to try to get her under control. And it was right there that we could see that moon in Aries. We could see here Pluto with Mercury, and we could see, the sun and Venus in the sixth house. All of that was made evident when I heard Ase Houston talking about Whitney early on. And so as it stood, you know, Ase Houston was the one, Whitney's mother, was the one who, because Ase Houston was already singing, and she in the family, which, let me jump over here to this fourth house in Gemini. Let me just say this part, and then I'll talk about further the family. Not that I'm saying anything new, but I'm just pointing out what it is that we are able to see in the chart. So here's a family line in the fourth house. With the ancients, the family line represents the father. It represents the ancestry. It represents the family line. It represents home and all of that. And so we have this here in Gemini. The ruler of Gemini is Mercury. So for that, we can see here clearly that within the family line, communication is huge. using the voice is huge. And we can see that it was the partnerships of the family line that was a part of this heritage that Whitney had. Her Warwick, Dionne Warwick is her was her cousin, her first cousin, and Dionne Warwick was already a huge musical success. Her mother, her cousins, her aunts, the whole family, and her father was in the entertainment industry, was in an industry. Her father was a promoter and a producer and a management. He had a management company for entertainment. All of that we can see here with this Gemini, which is out and it is speaking and it is expressing and it is talking and it is communicating with everyone. So that is a part of her DNA and her bloodline lineage. And the ruler is Mercury coming over here in the seventh house, allowing us to see that that family dynamic was a huge proponent of what it was that she ended up doing with her communication, Mercury, with her voice. And it of course it helped her. It was the family connections that her mother had, that Dionne Warwick had, that enabled her to even be spotted and seen and have the opportunities that she had with her voice to be able to bring it to the public stage. Okay, so going back over here to the second house, the ruler of Aries is Mars. So where is Mars? Mars is over here in the eighth house, and I am using whole house, a whole house sign chart, which is what the ancients used. The Placidus is a newer system, and so for working with the ancient astrology, Hellenistic astrology, traditional astrology, the whole house system is the one that is used, and it makes things that much more simple because a whole sign, whatever the sign is, it takes up the whole house. It takes up the whole house. It's not split like it is in the Placidus. And so it just makes for greater ease and more clarity in working with the chart. And for thousands of years, this is what the ancients used. So I'm glad to be using it. So again, the ruler of the second house, Mars, is over here in the eighth house. And Whitney's mother was a Libra. Her birthday was September 30th. So her son came into Whitney's eighth house. So the eighth house, again, is a house of lots of challenges. In modern astrology, it is associated with psychological issues and trauma and pain. And the ancients called this house the idol house. It's associated with death. It's associated with other people's resources, other people's resources that they bring into your life. And so it is here that we can see that the resources, the connections that her mother had um, became her connections, became her resources. So through her relationship with her mother, we're talking about synastry, it brought um, the resources of people and talent to Whitney. It brought that into her life. And so her mother's son coming into this house again will bring power dynamics. It will bring power dynamics as it relates to finances and how she wanted to use her Mars, how she wanted to self-actualize, because Mars shows how we take action and how we move. And then Mars being in the sign of Libra is considered at its detriment because he's all the way across the sky from home. So he is in the house of Venus. So Mars being hosted by Venus, again, just like we talked about the moon being in Aries sign. So now Mars is over at the temple or the home of Venus in the sign of Libra, and so he wants to act and he wants to do what it is that he does, but he can only work with the tools that he is given by Venus. So what does Venus want? Venus wants diplomacy. Venus wants let's work together, let's be together, let's come together, is Venus. But in the sign Mars, Mars is cutting. Mars rules knives. Mars is about separation. And so here in Venus's home, in the eighth house, it brings this warring energy as it relates to as it relates to others, as it relates to relationships. And Libra is the sign of relationships. So it brings a warring, as it relates to how I move, and it can bring an indecisiveness where Libra is oftentimes wanting to be diplomatic and make choices that will make other people feel better. The challenge of Mars being here can cause one, when they want to take actions, it can bring them to a place where they can abandon what it is that they want to do. And oftentimes they are not sure about what it is that they want to do, especially with this Pisces rising. What it is that will be best for me, and balancing, bringing a balance. Libra is the sign of balances. So bringing a balance to what it is that I am doing for you and what it is that I'm doing for me. And the eighth house is associated with others. It comes after the seventh house of partnership. So now it is asking, what am I doing now that we have partnered? What am I doing, Mars? What am I doing? What actions am I taking for this relationship? And in the sign of Libra, this Mars can be cutting and slicing the relationship and the equality of the relationship, as Whitney in this chart is trying to take actions and find the balance in her actions that are suited for her and the other person that she has come in partnership with. And so it is a very challenging place, and brings a lot of, I want to use the word confusion, but it is confusion in the sense that, um, what is yours is mine, and what is mine is yours. Eighth house. And trying to come to a place where there is an understanding of the separation between the two, and in that, war can ensue, because again, Venus is bringing Mars, love and kindness and diplomacy, and he doesn't necessarily know, how to operate with this, because there's going to be frustration in the part of the native, which is Whitney, and the other people that she is, in relationship with, about setting boundaries, about setting proper boundaries, and doing what is right for her. And of course, we know that did play out. So we come back over here to the fifth house. And so she has the North Node in the fifth house. And not only does she have the North Node there, but it's not listed here. She has her lot of fortune, which is an Arabic calculation of where fortune will be most prominent in her life. And she has that at 8 degrees of Cancer. So it's in the house here with this North Node. And this is, of course, very significant in what it is that she does with her life and the direction that her life does take. And it is in the sign of Cancer. So with the sign of Cancer, we see here there is an association, because it follows the fourth house. So here is what it is the house is called the joy of Venus. The ancients assigned Venus's joy. Venus gets her joy from being in the fifth house. So Venus is associated with the things that are pleasurable to us, including beauty and good food and entertainment. And so this fifth house here and the North Node being here, her life was called to her path. She was desperate for. So when we think about the North Node in the traditional sense, as if we look to the Vedics, which call it Rahu, and they call the South Node, which is going to be here in Capricorn at 20 degrees. Rahu, or the North Node, is where we are desperately passionate and hungry for material things, for the material manifestation of the house and the sign that it is in. And so here in this fifth house, it gives birth after this fourth, gives birth to the creativity. It shows the children that we give birth to, the things that we love, the fun, the joy that we bring to our lives through what it is that we create. What it is that we are able to perform the very best at. The fifth house is associated with, again, theatrics and performances. It is in the ancients. This is the ancient. And so it is associated with the joy of falling in love and the joy of having sex. All of that, according to the ancients, is associated in the fifth house. In modern astrology, sex is associated with the eighth house. And in Vedic astrology, it's associated with the 12th house. And so it is here that we can see this love for singing and performing with the North Node here and the part of fortune, which again you don't see, but it is here at 8 degrees. So this is in the fifth house, which is a great house. It is a joyful house. It is a happy house. So her North Node here, her joy is found in her performing. And with the sign of Cancer, again, there is a nurturing that comes through with her performance. There is this this energy of being held warm, through her gift that she brought forth. And if you sit, and I'm sure many of you who listen to this will feel the same, that when you listen to her sing and hold those notes, there is this transcendent place. There is this warm place like that you go to. You go to this warm place in your heart, and it brings you joy, and it brings you a nurturing to your spirit. And that is what her gift did bring to us. And we can see that operating here in the fifth house. Now, the ruler of Cancer is the moon, and it is over here in the second house of income. And so it is here we can see that from her joy of singing and her joy of performing, we can see here the moon is here, that she is able to bring that here and generate her income from her creative passion. And so she did. And when we look at, because this is a night chart, the moon is happy being in the lower section of the chart because it is dark. The sun is low, and so the moon does better here in this dark part. Venus wants to be here. Mars also in a night chart wants to be beneath the horizon in the lowest part. Of course, her Mars is here in the 8th house, which brings even more challenges to this Mars because it is not in a place that it feels most comfortable in a night chart. And again, she has a night chart because she was born at 8:55 p.m. Not only that, the sun is located beneath the horizon line. It's located here. And so, as we move on, I want to. We talked about the sixth house. We talked about the seventh house, and Mercury. When we go to the ancient texts about Mercury, Mercury was considered to be the one that created, or Hermes, who is associated with Mercury, and he was the one who created the lyre. So there is this great association with Mercury and musicians, especially exalted Mercury in the sign of Virgo. And so there are many musicians who have this exalted Mercury, and they are able to tap into the details, Virgo in Mercury in Virgo, able to tap into the details and the nuances of communication by way of music in a very powerful way. Okay, so we talked about the seventh house, so we talked about the eighth house, and then so for her ninth house. So the ninth house is the joy of the sun. The sun likes to be in the ninth house. So she has Scorpio here in the ninth house. So the ninth house is a house of religion and communication and long distance travel. So here she has Scorpio, who is ruled by Mars. So we have the ruler of the ninth house in the eighth house. So again, this travel and this religion is a very deep and a very transformative training ground for Whitney. And it was, in the church, singing, and she talked, and her mother talked. Her mother was the minister of music in the Baptist church in which she was raised. And so this is high. This is a house of higher education. Again, it is a house of, and it is through higher education. Oftentimes, the ancients would, and this is why higher education is associated with the ninth house, is because the ancients, the ancient philosophers, and the ancient astrologers understood that you would receive higher training and higher knowledge as you traveled far away from home and learned other philosophies and learned about various religions and various cultures. They understood that this is where you would receive knowledge that would cause you to evolve. And through this evolution, you would be prepared for the 10th house. You would be prepared to share this learning and this training with the world. And so it was through this ninth house and the eighth house, the training of her mother. And again, the partnership with her family. All of this is linked. And her training within the church, it is linked to her musical training and preparation for what we saw when she was brought to the world stage. And it was, hidden, and there were painful things. Again, we talked about this Mars in the eighth house. And so this Mars in the eighth house, there was training that was that left her where she was not able to necessarily make her own decisions about how she necessarily wanted her life to move forward. And it was something that she experienced a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure about, a lot of control. Neptune is here, and so Neptune, of course, brings delusion. Neptune brings confusion. Neptune brings things that are not clear. So, there was an interview in one of the documentaries that I was watching, and they talked about before Whitney hit the world stage how she was taken, and you know her appearance was changed, and she was brought into this particular place. She would be singing at the nightclub, and of course, she was singing at the church, but she was also, as her mother said, I would take her and put her on stage at the nightclub to kind of market her in a sense, to market her for those who would want to sign her and to get her, you know, out in the public light. And so, it was 2 years before she came out with that album in 1985, before it was released. And so her training behind the scenes for that album, as the producer, he was describing that Clive Davis, of course, was the one who ultimately signed her. And he was describing that she would have to work for hours and hours and hours on end, and she was not accustomed to that. Even though at the age of 13, she was already in the studio singing background for different artists and so forth. So she had been in the studio, she had been in this environment. Um, but again, there were things that she did not fully understand. She did not fully understand the training, the depths, the secret dealings that were going on um, in this evolution of who she was to become. She had to be changed and she had to be altered before she could hit the world stage. So she went through this in-depth and painful Scorpio, painful transition of her life that it was before she was able to become, a mainstream artist. And so when we look again at this ninth house, and Scorpio is this sign of, it is a feminine water sign, and it is filled with a depth of secrets. And Neptune being here, filled with a depth of secrets and illusions that are happening, as it even related to her religious belief. And going back to her mother, it was later in her life that there was a rift between Whitney and her mother, because she found that her mother had had an affair with a man at the church. Again, that's all signified here in this ninth house. And her mother was one of her great teachers. So there were secrets and there were hidden things that she didn't understand, even about her great teacher, who was indeed her mother, signified by this moon here in the second house, and the ruler is in the eighth house. So, it was very deep. The things that, a lot of hidden things were happening from the teachers and around her, who were preparing her to hit the world stage. And she would later say after everything, after really her life had imploded, and before it had imploded, there was an interview where she was speaking, and this was in 1999, and she said, I wish that I could go back to what music used to be, when it was just fun, and when I was just singing in the church, and I was just singing, and when it was not, when the secrets had not been revealed, because later on, of course, they were. The 10th house is in Sagittarius. So this is the ruler of Sagittarius is here in the second house, conjunct the moon. The moon and Jupiter love each other. They work well together. And so even though Jupiter is the greatest benefic planet of a day chart, in this chart, uh, Jupiter blesses Whitney's life so tremendously. So we have the ruler of the 10th house, which is the highest part of the sky. This is the peak. This is where you are seen to the whole world after you have received your training and so forth. And you are in the world, and the world sees you. So here in Sagittarius, we can see that she was called to a life of travel. She was called to a life of not only travel, but traveling the world. traveling the world and communicating with those all over the world. And indeed, she did. And the ruler here coming into the second house indicates that she would be known for this voice. It expands. Jupiter came in the second house and it expanded that gift that enabled her to create income. So she was able to create large amounts of income. Of course, she was a multimillionaire, and she was able to do it by way of her body, her physical body, her physical look, her look that she had, this beauty. Oftentimes, Neptune or Pisces on the ascendant can bring a glamour to the face. And so she had this beautiful glamour. Of course, she worked as a model a little bit before, but she didn't want to do that. She wanted to sing, she wanted to use her voice, so she didn't stay with that. She even had a couple of acting roles that she did, but it was meant for her to make money by her appeal to various cultures all over the world. That's what Sagittarius is representative of. It is representative of uh, a guru who teaches and who, on the highest level, is able to embrace all types of cultures and is able to connect with people everywhere and find the benefit and the beauty in various beliefs and philosophies and cultures. And she did do that through her life, through her work, through her voice. Then we have in the 11th house, we have Capricorn here in the 11th house. So the 11th house is the house that is the joy of Jupiter, according to the ancients. Jupiter loves being in this house. He is not here. This is Capricorn, so it brings this building energy. So wherever Capricorn is, it is about building. It is about things um, that have stood the test of time, that are tried and true. And she has the south node that is here. So the south node represents that which is released, that which is defecated. As we talked about Rahu being the north node of the moon, where we are ravenous in this area for more, more, more. The south node represents where we release, where we defecate, where we shed things. So whenever this 11th house is activated by transit or activated by an annual profection or a zodiacal release, it will activate this releasing of the south node. So that would be a releasing of um, what friendship looks like and who friends were, and coming to a new appreciation of what network is or what network should be, and who we should be networking with. And that is the south node here. So, ways of life that we learned early on. This is what a friendship should look like, and this is who they are. The south node here can bring release, and the south node and the north node, they are auspicious in the 5th and the 11th houses. They bring a level of protection there. So we have the ruler of Capricorn, which is Saturn, in the 12th house. So Saturn being in the 12th house lets us know that there were hidden things in the friendship circles, hidden things, malefic things, um, because the 11th house is the house of loss. It is the house of self undoing. It is the house of hidden enemies. 6th house is open enemies. 12th house, hidden enemies. So the friends that she thought were tried and true were those who uh, were her undoing, um, who blocked her. Saturn represents blockages and walls and things being hindered. So, again, the people that I thought were tried and true, Capricorn, this is Whitney, people that she thought were tried and true in Capricorn turned out to be the hidden enemies who blocked her, who challenged her mentally, who um, caused her some of the greatest dis-ease, and oftentimes brought the triggering to her, the challenges that she had mentally, that added to added to how she tried to self-medicate, how she did self-medicate, and then ultimately it brought the loss that we all know about, the loss of her reputation and the loss of her career, and the many, many losses that she experienced and that were very public. And again, that was tied to this great malefic here. And Saturn in the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is the ruler, he is the ruler of Aquarius in his home sign, in his dignity. And, Saturn in Aquarius is the outlier. Saturn in his sign, in his masculine sign of Aquarius. Capricorn is the feminine sign of Saturn, and Aquarius is the masculine sign of Saturn. So here we have the mental outlier, in thoughts and progressive thoughts and the way things should be. We have an outlier who does not fit in with the crowd in this place, in this 12th house, in this place where there is already, there is already a feeling of isolation, a feeling of being misunderstood. And that, of course, is standing across from the sun and Venus. And so as her life continued on, all of this played out in a major way. So Whitney was a little girl, and it was she shared with one of her closest friends, Pat, that she was molested. She was molested by a cousin, a female cousin. When her mother would leave her, her mother would leave her and her brothers at various family members' houses as they went on tour. So she would be gone for extended periods of time. And it was during this time that she was molested by her cousin. And not only was she molested, her brother Gary reports that he was also molested by this cousin who was the daughter of Dionne Warwick. And that is something, of course, that can be seen with Chiron in the first, a wound to the body, you know, um, because the first house is the body. And it can also be seen by Mars in the eighth house, which is this house of hidden and dark secrets. And so Mars, of course, has to do with sexuality. It has to do with penetration. It has to do with separating. It has to do with separating. So, this is, again, it can be seen by the Mars. It can be seen by the Chiron. This molestation that she experienced. And of course, it absolutely affected her mind because it was something that she did not feel that she could share. And one of her friends said that she told her to share it with her mother. And she said, "No, I'm not going to share it with my mother because my mother would kill somebody if she knew." So it was something that she, again, that disturbed her so terribly that, it surely we can only speculate that it was something that caused her to self-medicate, something that caused her to self-medicate. Okay, so that is walking through the chart, and so next we are going to look at how she came into success. Okay, so we are continuing on, and now we are looking at the success of Whitney Houston. We're looking at that moment where she was launched into the public eye, where her gifts were made known for everyone to see. And in order to do that, we are going to look at what is called annual profections. So, the annual profection is an ancient tool of astrology that highlights an area of life based on your ascendant. So, for Whitney Houston, when she turned 21 years old, she was in a 10th house annual profection year. And so, for anyone who is turning 21, they are entering into a 10th house annual profection. So, for her, she has the 10th house in the sign of Sagittarius. So, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. So, Jupiter becomes the time lord of what is happening in her life. So, what does that mean? That means that um, the expansive nature of Jupiter, because his qualities are as the great benefic, his qualities are that of a giver. He expands whatever he is in contact with. So, as the ruler of her 10th house, and he is the time lord for this particular timing tool, he is here in her second house of income and finance, and he is conjunct the moon. And so remember, we talked earlier about the moon as in ancient Egyptian astrology. Thoth is associated with the moon, and giving this gift coming through the moon, coming through emotion and expression, and as a part of the body. There is an association with the body with the ancient astrologers. So for her, and then Jupiter is also the ruler of her first house. This was an indication that through her communication, through her gifts and her talents that come out of her body as a part of her natural gifts and talents of her body, and then the uniqueness that is a part of Chiron, it set her up to be seen by the world. And the sign of Sagittarius is associated with this grand world travel, meeting up with people from various cultures and various lifestyles. And this was it heralded, the planets. When we look at the birth chart, it is a proclamation for the life. It is a promise. It is called a natal promise. So when we look at these Time Lord techniques, and this one being one, the annual profection, it is a Time Lord tool, a timing tool for us to look and see um, far in advance we can. And for Whitney, we are looking at what the testimony was, what the natal promise was for this woman. And it was this: it was for her to use that gift, that voice, that communication and travel with the moon. The moon is fast moving and constantly changing, and that ability of hers to use her body and the gifts that are associated with her body, and of course working with others to do so. As I pointed out in the first part of the birth chart reading, that this heralded a time for her to take it out to the world and to be known and to be seen for it. And this happened in 1985, February 14th. Her album was released. Before that time, her mother said, you know, I would not allow her to sign. I would not allow her. And it took 2 years. She had signed when she was in um, an eighth house annual perfection year, where Venus was the ruler. She signed then, but it took 2 years for the work, the training, the cultivation of this work that she had put in to be seen on the public stage. And when she reached that 10th house annual perfection year, what the work that she had done here was seen for the world to know about, and it was taken to the world and all over the world. And then next we're going to look at some other time frames of her life. Oh, one other thing before we move on, I want to show you. So the marker is not here, but her lot of fortune is located at 8 degrees of Cancer here in the 5th house. Another timing tool that indicates that this would be a very auspicious career for her is that it's called derivative houses. So we derive from the lot of fortune. We're going to count 10 from the lot of fortune. So the lot of fortune shows where you will be most fortunate. So her lot of fortune is here in the 5th house of performance and joy and theatrics and all of the beautiful, loving and lovely things that we like to do. Her part of fortune is here, and it is in the same house as the North Node. So that again gives her this an auspicious gift of being able to make her joy manifest for her. But what's more, in derived houses, when we count forward the 10th house placement from this lot of fortune, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we land in the 2nd house. So there again, her lot of fortune, 10th from the lot of fortune, is the placement that will be seen by all, where your lot of fortune will be recognized. And it is here in this 10th house of income, where Jupiter is, where the moon is. The ruler of the 10th is that her lot of fortune is seen here. So in her chart, there was testimony given by the planets that she would be a very wealthful and very wealthy and prominent woman based on her natural gifts and abilities and talents that she brings out to the world. Okay, so we are continuing on looking at the life of Whitney Houston, and now we are looking at tools of timing. We are looking at how the planets and the stars speak to times in our lives. They again, the natal chart, it testifies, and then the planets as they travel and speaks to and testify to the other planets that are in the natal chart. They herald times of change that are upcoming. And so with Whitney Houston, we can see that it was time for her to be married and have a child. And this is shown to us by way of the eclipses that happened in 1992 and 1993. So we know when we go through eclipse cycles, they last about a year and a half. So beginning June 14th, 1992, there began to be the eclipses that happened in the signs of Sagittarius and Gemini, back to back to back and over again. So when these eclipses were taking place, they were announcing the time of change, announcing the time of her reputation being changed in the world. So we can see here that there was an eclipse happening at 24 degrees of Sagittarius, June 14th, 1992. So this was a lunar eclipse because it is opposite the sun that is here in Gemini. So for Whitney Houston, she has Sagittarius here on the 10th house cusp, and on the fourth house cusp, she has Gemini. So this is the chart of the day that I drew up, the chart of June 14th, 1992. So again, here is the moon in the sign of Sagittarius, and there is the eclipse happening right here. And then a month later, she married Bobby Brown. And so this here, again, is an indication, the 10th house, these eclipses between the 10th and 4th house axis announce and they herald a change. They herald for her. It was a herald that her life of a single woman was over, because lunar eclipses bring endings, solid endings where you can never go back and cross that bridge again. So for Whitney Houston, she was never able to cross back over the bridge as to be a woman who is motherless and unmarried, because these same eclipses gave her her daughter, Bobby Christina. So the next year in 1993, in March of 1993, still under this Gemini Sagittarius eclipse cycle that was happening in her 10th and 4th house, on the 10th and 4th house axis, she had Bobby Christina. So she changed from being a single woman to being a married woman with a child. And from that, she was never to go, be able to go back again to being that person who was motherless and just single, of course. So she, of course, she had, she went to a stage of divorce, but she was never able to go back again to be, single, never married. Okay. So that is what happened in the 10th house. Her reputation in the world changed and her home life changed. Okay. So that was heralded by the eclipses. I failed to mention that during this eclipse, during the year of 1992, not only did she get married, but she also became world known and was celebrated throughout the world for her movie, The Bodyguard, which was released in 1992 under this energy of this lunar eclipse. So that eclipse also brought in that particular change for her, but she also had a miscarriage. Again, we're talking fourth house again. So she had a miscarriage before, the year before she had Bobby Christina. So the eclipses brought success, and then they also brought, pain in relation to her losing the baby. And she was really upset um, about the miscarriage, and that people announced it. She wasn't able to grieve at all about it. She was making the movie, and the day after she had the miscarriage, she said that she went back to work. She went back to work under the pressure of those who were telling her, we cannot lose time on this movie. And she also said that it was during this time after the movie was released, that she started, self-medicating that much more with alcohol and drugs. Because this is me saying that I believe that it was because she was under so much pressure to perform. She never had a chance to grieve that miscarriage, because um, she needed to perform. She needed to perform for others, because, there was money on the line with the box office and so forth. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that in. Okay, so now we are looking at when things began to be more challenging for Whitney, when she really, when things really began to spiral downward for her, and that too is heralded by the planets, and we are looking at an eclipse from January 31st, 1999, and it was in 1999 that reports were made that she started having problems with her voice, and she began to cancel various shows. Um, uh, Reports began to come out, later on that, next year, we'll look at that as well. Um, that she was, again, missing her appointments in 1999. There was some issues with drugs where she was caught with drugs on her by the police, um, and then her father's company stepped in to have the drug charges dropped and this sort of thing. So it was really in 1999 that there was testimony given through the planetary aspects, the transiting planets, and so forth, that spoke to things beginning to go downhill as opposed to continuing to go upward. And so the eclipse of January 31st, 1999, we can see here that it was a lunar eclipse, and the sun is standing at 11 degrees of Aquarius, and the moon is at 11 degrees of Leo. So for Whitney, that comes right here into her. It's directly affecting her Venus, which is at 11 degrees. So this moon is being triggered um, by the sun. So the sun is over here in her 12th, where Saturn is, and Venus is here with the moon. And so this is the house of health. And so again, there were reports at this time that she was having problems with her voice. And then her sun is affected here too, because it is conjunct Venus. Not only that, Venus is the ruler of the third house. So this is her communication. This is her ability to, use her voice um, and so forth. So things begin to start cracking at this time. So this is the eclipse. So the 12th house has to do again with hidden enemies. It has to do with health, mental health in particular. Mental health and the mind and body. The health of the mind is significant for the health of the body. If the mind is not healthy, the body cannot be healthy. And oftentimes, if the body is not well, then it affects the mind by way of stress and disease of the mind, where you cannot rest and you cannot have peace. So for Whitney, the telltale signs began to show up here in 1999, and that was heralded by this eclipse and the eclipse season that continued on, through in the sign of Leo and Aquarius, that continued to happen for that year and a half. And really, when we have these eclipses like this, when we have these hard transits, the planets are asking us to look at what is going on in our lives and to make necessary changes so that the result does not have to be as negative. Now, again, I said in the beginning that we are looking at free will and fate. How much of what happens is free will and how much of it is fated to happen. That's up for debate and up for question all the time. But it is my belief that for some things, like if we are taking action, and we look at the sixth house, oftentimes when we have transits that are hitting the sixth house, um, it's asking us to change the way we are eating, change our routines, change perhaps how we are sleeping, how much rest are we receiving. And so when the eclipses come in, they could be highlighting this area for us and bringing up, giving us notice, giving us forewarning. Like the Bible says in the scriptures, warning comes before destruction. And so there were warnings that had begun to happen, you know, in 99 for sure. And before that too, 95, there were some things that happened, but this was one of the really big telltale signs, where it is clear that the mental health and the physical health began to be affected by the daily activities and the stress that her body was undergoing, and then the stress of her relationships and so forth. Okay, so now we are looking at another timing technique that the ancient astrologers used, and it is called zodiacal releasing. And so the long and the short of it is that through this process, we look at where the part of spirit is located in your natal chart. And the part of spirit, whatever sign is in, will indicate the overarching time frame that uh, this time lord or the lord of that sign is in. So whatever is happening with that lord of that sign will really affect the native. It gives testimony to the season that the native is in and some of the experiences that will be taking place. So for this zodiacal releasing, she is in a um, Capricorn time lord period. Okay, so the zodiac sign of Capricorn is highlighted, and it stays highlighted for 27 years of an individual's life. So she entered into that overarching time lord period in March 21st of 1990. Okay, and so Saturn, as we mentioned, is this time lord, and Saturn is the great malefic that is in her chart, because this is a nighttime chart. She was born at night, so Saturn is extremely malefic for those who are born at night. And Saturn is in a very challenging place. He's in the 12th house, but not only in the 12th house, he is making an opposition to the Sun and to Venus. And so this is a very painful time that she enters into beginning March 21st of 1990, because she, even up until the time that she passed away, she was still in this overarching time. So this process, or this time lord technique, is much more complicated than the annual profection timing, and there's levels to it. So there's a level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for her, she had the overarching energy of Saturn, which is really important because Saturn is a malefic. So any transits that are happening to Saturn are highlighted. So the malefic power that he has is that much more powerful during the periods where he is the time lord. Okay, so on level 4, uh, Leo, this house of Leo here is affected. And so we're talking about June 21st of 2001. That is a time that I want to talk about in particular, um, because during that time, things were public about what was happening with her life. As we mentioned about the eclipses that happened in 1999, 99, and 2000 that were affecting her chart as far as this 6th house and the 12th house. So here again, through the zodiacal release, we can see again, again, it is another indicator. It is another Time Lord indicator that there will be challenges that will be in her life during this time period. And so even though she had some successes and she got married, it was affected by this malefic Saturn because he is the time lord of this period. And then on the lower level, the sun is on the level 4 of the zodiacal releasing. The sun is impacted. So, and then again, the sun is having this negative impact from Saturn. So there are health issues that are going on that are being highlighted, and the negativity is being brought to the forefront. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to end my this astrological study of the life of Whitney Houston here. I think that I have just given enough evidence of how the planets, the transiting planets, the timing tools from ancient astrology can really help us to see times in our lives where we can take more precaution, um, where we can actually see times within our own charts where it is an auspicious time for us to move forward with what it is that we want to bring forward in the world. And I believe that even this astrological study has raised the questions, or will continue the discussion regarding fate and free will. I definitely do not have all of the answers. I believe that we do have free will, but some things are just destined for us to encounter. Um, but I thank you so much for listening. And I know this has been, almost 2 hours, but I wanted to do due diligence and bringing this information forward because of how much Whitney Houston meant to me and how much she means to so many people. And again, I thank you for listening. And I say to you, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe O, Yod He Vave.